name, even name it. We definitely should do Caligari Sisters. W, I got a viewer on Kick. W Kick viewer. Yo, yesterday I was so fucking tired, bro. No, like earlier this morning, I was so fucking tired. And I'm being late for work. I don't ever want to be late. One, because I want to move up and make more money. Two, because I don't want to lose any money. Um, let's see. Let me check politics too. Oh, I changed my YouTube. I can do that.
What happens with other people, or what the product does for people, like what is that for you when you're looking for people
Yeah,
to come work for you? Like
like
what's the salient thing that you look for, or if there are a
that's
few?
a different question, I guess. It's I mean, if, in terms of your end product, you just have to say like, well, if this thing is successful, how useful will it be to how many people? And that's what I mean. And then you do whatever, whether you're CEO or any role in a startup, you do whatever it takes to succeed. Like and just always be smashing your ego. Like internalize responsibility. Um, like a major failure mode is when ego to ability ratio um, is double greater than sine one. You know, like if your ego to ability ratio it gets too high, then you're going to basically break the feedback loop to reality. And in AI terms, your RL you'll have you'll break your RL loop. So you don't want to break you want to have a strong RL loop, which means internalizing responsibility and minimizing ego, and you do whatever the task is, no matter whether it's grand or humble. So I mean that's kind of like why I prefer the term like engineering as opposed to research. I prefer the term, I actually don't want it to call XAI a lab. I just want to be a company. Um,
Mm.
it's like whatever the simplest, um, most straightforward, uh, ideally lowest ego terms are. Those are generally a good way to go. Um,
Yeah.
you want to just close the loop on reality hard. Um, that's a super big deal.
I think everyone in this room is really looks up to everything you've done around being sort of a paragon of first principles, and thinking about
Yeah.
the stuff you've done. Um, how do you actually determine your reality? Because that seems like a pretty big part of it. Like other people, people who have never made anything, non-engineers, sometimes journalists at time who've never done anything, like they will criticize you. But then clearly you have another set of people who are builders, who have very high, sort of area under the curve, who are in your circle. Like, how should people approach that? Like, what has worked for you, and what would you pass on, like, to X, to your children? Like, what do you tell them when you're like, you need to make your way in this world? Here, here's how to construct a
Bro, he
reality
just
that is
asked him like
predictive
five
from
different
first
questions, bro.
principles.
Well, the tools of physics are incredibly helpful uh, to
Hmm.
to understand and make progress in any field.
Yeah.
Um, and first principles means just obviously just means break things down to the fundamental axiomatic elements that are most likely to be true, and then reason up from there as cogently as possible, as opposed to reasoning by analysis or metaphor. Um, and then it just simple things like thinking in the limit. Like if you extrapolate, you know, minimize this thing or maximize that thing, thinking in the limit is very very helpful. I'd use all the tools of physics. Um, they apply to any field.
Mm.
Um, this is like a superpower, actually. Um, so you can take for example like rockets. You could say, well, how much should a rocket cost? Um, the typical approach to that people would take to how much rocket should cost is they would look historically at what the cost of rockets are
Yeah.
and assume that any new rocket must be somewhat similar to the prior cost of rockets. A first principles approach would be you look at the materials that the rocket is comprised of. So if that's aluminum, copper, carbon fiber, steel, whatever the case may be, and say what how much does that rocket weigh, and what are the constituent elements, and how much do they weigh? What is the material price per kilogram of those constituent elements? And that sets the actual floor on what a rocket can cost. It can asymptotically approach the cost of the raw materials. And then you realize, oh, actually, the raw materials of a rocket are only maybe 1 or 2% of the historical cost of a rocket. So the manufacturing must necessarily be very inefficient um, if the raw material cost is only 1 or 2%. That would be a first principles analysis of the potential for for cost optimization of a rocket, and that's before you get to reusability. To give an
He's
AI
so
sort of
smart, man.
AI example, I guess last year for XAI, when we were trying to build a, a training supercluster, we went to the various suppliers to ask. We said this was beginning of last year that we needed 100,000 H100s to be able to train coherently,
Yeah.
and their estimates for how long it would take to complete that were 18 to 24 months. It's like, well, we need to get that done in 6 months. So then um, or we won't be competitive. So then, if you break that down, what are the things you need? Well, you need a building, you need power, you need cooling. Um, we didn't have enough time to build a building from scratch, so we've had to find an existing building. So we found a factory that was no longer in use in Memphis that used to build Electrolux products. But then the input power was 15 megawatts, and we needed 150 megawatts. So we rented generators and had generators on one side of the building, and then we have to have cooling. So we rented about a quarter of the mobile cooling capacity of the U.S. and put the chillers on the other side of the building. That didn't fully solve the problem because the power variations during training are very big. So you can have power can drop by 50% in 100 milliseconds, which the generators can't keep up with. So then we added Tesla Megapacks and modified the software in the Megapacks to be able to smooth out the power variation during the training run. Um, and then there were a bunch of networking challenges because the networking cables, if you're trying to make 100,000 GPUs train coherently, are very very challenging.
Almost, it sounds like almost any of those things you mentioned, I could imagine someone telling you very directly, no, you can't have that. You can't have that power. You can't have this. And it sounds like one of the salient pieces of first principles thinking is actually, let's ask why. Let's figure that out, and actually let's
Yeah.
challenge the person across the table. And if I don't get an answer that I feel good about, I'm gonna, not allow that to be. I'm not gonna let that no to stand. Is that? I mean, that feels like something that everyone. If someone were to try to do what you're doing in hardware seems to uniquely need this. In software, we have lots of fluff and things that it's like we can add more CPUs for that. It'll be fine. But in hardware, it's just not going to work.
I think these general principles of first principle thinking apply to software and hardware, apply to anything really. I'm just using kind of a hardware example um, of how we were told something is impossible, but once we broke it down into the constituent elements of we need a building, we need power, we need cooling, we need uh, we need power smoothing, and then we could solve those constituent elements. Um, but it was and then we just ran the networking operation to do all the cabling, everything in 4 shifts, 24/7, and I was like sleeping in the data center and also doing cabling myself. Um, and there were a lot of other issues to solve. You know, nobody had done a training run with 100,000 um, H100s training coherently last year. Maybe it's been done this year. I don't know, but and then we ended up doubling that to 200,000, and so now we've got 150,000 H100s, 50K H200s, and 30K GB200s in the Memphis training center, and we're about to bring 110,000 GB200s online at a second data center, also in the Memphis area.
Is it your view that pre-training still working, and larger the scaling laws still hold, and whoever wins this race will have basically the biggest, smartest possible model that you could distill?
Well, there's other various elements that um, decide competitiveness for large AI. There's for sure the talent of the people matter. Um, the scale of the hardware matters, and how well you're able to bring that hardware to bear. So you can't just order a whole bunch of GPUs and they don't. You can't just plug them in. So you've got to get a lot of GPUs and have them um, train coherently and stably. Um, then it's like, what unique access to data do you have? I guess distribution matters to some degree as well. Like, how do people get exposed to your AI? Those are critical factors for if it's going to be like a large foundation model that's competitive. Um, you know, as many have said, I think my friend Elias Sutskeyer said, uh, we've kind of run out of pre-training data of human-generated like human-generated data. You run out of tokens pretty fast. Um, of certainly of high quality tokens, and um, and you have to do a lot of you need to essentially create synthetic data, um, and be able to accurately judge the synthetic data that you're creating to verify, like, is this real synthetic data, or is it an hallucination that doesn't actually match reality? Um, so achieving grounding in reality is tricky, but we are at the stage where there's more effort put into synthetic data. And like right now we're training Grok 3.5, which is a heavy focus on reasoning.
Going back to your physics point, what I heard for reasoning is
Yeah.
that hard science,
They
particularly
updated
physics
that to
textbooks, are very useful for
Grok 4.
reasoning, whereas
This is like from a few weeks
I think
ago.
researchers have told me that social science is totally useless
Ah,
for reasoning.
yes, that's probably true. Um, so yeah, something that's going to be very important in the future is um, combining deep AI in the data center or supercluster with robotics.
Hmm.
So that things like the Optimus humanoid robot, and
Incredible.
yeah, Optimus is awesome. There's going to be so many humanoid robots, and robots of all sizes and shapes. But my prediction is that there will be more humanoid robots by far than all other robots combined, by maybe an order of magnitude, like a big difference. Um, and
Is it
it
true
seems
that
like
you're planning a robot army of a sort?
whether we do it or whether Tesla does it. Tesla works closely with XAI. Um, like you've seen how many humanoid robot startups are there. Like it's like I think Jensen Huang was on stage with with a massive number of robots, you know, robots from different companies. I think there was like a dozen different humanoid robots. So I mean, I guess part of what I've been fighting and maybe what has slowed me down somewhat is that I'm a little I don't want to make Terminator real, you know. So I've been sort of, I guess, at least until recent years, dragging my feet on AI and humanoid robotics. And then I sort of come to the realization it's happening whether I do it or not. So you got really two choices. You could either be a spectator or a participant. And so like, well, I guess I'd rather be a participant than a spectator. So now it's, pedal to the metal on humanoid robots and digital superintelligence.
So I guess there's a
I
third
think it'll
thing
be
that
great.
everyone has heard you talk a lot about that I'm really a big fan of. Becoming a multiplanetary species. Where does this fit? This is all not just a 10 or 20 year thing, maybe a 100 year thing. Like it's a many generations for humanity kind of thing. You know, how do you think about it? There's AI, obviously. There's embodied robotics, and then there's being a multiplanetary species. Does everything sort of feed into that last point, or what are you driven by right now for the next 10, 20, and 100 years?
Geez, 100 years, man. I hope civilization's around in 100 years. If it is around, it's going to look very different from civilization today.
For sure.
Um, I mean, I'd predict that there's going to be at least 5 times as many humanoid robots as there are humans, maybe 10 times. Um, and one way to look at the progress of civilization is percentage completion Kardashev. So if you're Kardashev scale one, um, you've harnessed all the energy of a planet. Now, in my opinion, we've only harnessed maybe 1 or 2% of Earth's energy. So we've got a long way to go to be Kardashev scale one. Then Kardashev, Kardashev two, you've harnessed all the energy of a sun, which would be, I don't know, 1 billion times more energy than Earth, maybe closer to 1 trillion. Um, and then Kardashev three would be all the energy of a galaxy. Pretty far from that. So we're at the very early stage of the intelligence Big Bang. I hope we're on the in terms of being multiplanetary. Like I think we'll have enough mass transferred to Mars within like roughly 30 years to make Mars self-sustaining, such that Mars can
Yeah.
continue to grow and prosper, even if the resupply ships from Earth stop coming. And that greatly increases the probable lifespan of civilization or consciousness or intelligence, both biological and digital. Um, so that's why I think it's important to become a multi-planet species. And I'm somewhat troubled by the Fermi paradox. Like, why have we not seen any aliens?
Yeah.
And it could be because intelligence is incredibly rare. And maybe we're the only ones in this galaxy, in which case the intelligence of consciousness is this like tiny candle in a vast darkness. And we should do everything possible to ensure the tiny candle does not go out. And being a multi-planet species, or making consciousness multiplanetary, uh, greatly improves the probable lifespan of civilization. And it's the next step before going to other star systems.
Yeah.
Once you at least have 2 planets, then you've got a forcing function for the improvement of space travel, um, and um, and that ultimately is what will lead to consciousness expanding to the stars.
It could be that the Fermi paradox dictates once you get to some level of technology, you destroy yourself. How do we
Yeah,
stay ourselves? How do we actually? What would you prescribe to? I mean, a room full of engineers. Like, what can we do to prevent that from happening?
yeah. How do we avoid the great filters? One of the great filters would obviously be global thermonuclear war. Uh, so we should try to avoid that. Um, I guess building benign AI that loves humanity and
Yeah.
um, you know, robots that are helpful. Um,
Yeah.
something that I think is extremely important in building AI is a very rigorous adherence to truth, even if that truth is politically incorrect. I, my intuition for what could make AI very dangerous is um, if you force AI to believe things that are not true.
How do you think about, there's sort of this argument for open for safety versus closed for competitive edge. I mean, I think the great thing is you have a competitive model. Many other people also have competitive models, and in that sense, we're sort of off of maybe the worst timeline that I'd be worried about is, there's fast takeoff and it's only in one person's hands. That might, sort of collapse a lot of things. Whereas now we have choice, which is great. How do you think about this?
Yeah, I do think there will be several deep intelligences, maybe at least five, um, maybe as much as 10. Um, I'm not sure that there's going to be hundreds, but it's probably close to, like, maybe there'll be like 10 or something like that, of which maybe four will be in the US. Um, so I don't think it's going to be any one AI that has a runaway capability. Um,
You don't think so?
but yeah, several deep intelligences.
What will these deep intelligences actually be doing? Will it be scientific research or trying to hack each other?
Probably all of the above.
Mm.
Um, I mean, hopefully they will discover new physics, and I think they will very they're definitely going to invent new technologies. Um, like I think we're quite close to digital superintelligence.
Yeah.
It may happen this year, and if it doesn't happen this year, next year for sure. A digital superintelligence defined as smarter than any human at anything.
Well, so how do we
Yeah.
direct that to sort of superabundance? We could have
I'm
robotic
looking
labor,
for artificial
cheap
general
energy,
intelligence. I want the
intelligence on
AI to do
demand.
things for me.
Is that sort of the white pill? Like, where do you sit on the spectrum? And are there tangible things that you would encourage everyone here to be working on to make that white pill actually reality?
I think it most likely will be a good outcome. I guess I'd sort of agree with Jeff Hinton that maybe it's a 10 to 20% chance of annihilation. But look on the bright side, that's 80 to 90% probability of a great outcome. Um, so yeah, I can't emphasize this enough. A rigorous adherence
B
to
Cole
truth
says, "Hey, what's up, B?"
is the most important thing for AI safety. Um, and obviously empathy for humanity and life as we know it.
Yeah.
We haven't talked about Neuralink at all yet, but I'm curious. You're working on closing the input and output gap between humans and
Yeah,
machines. How critical is that to AGI, ASI, and once that link is made, can we not only read but also write?
the Neuralink is not necessary to solve digital superintelligence.
What are you
That'll
watching? What's
happen
this about?
before Neuralink is at scale.
So this is a
But
Elon Musk interview about
what Neuralink
artificial intelligence
can effectively do is solve
and
the input
his
output
the rest of his
bandwidth constraints.
businesses.
Especially our output bandwidth is very low. The sustained output of a human over the course of a day is less than 1 bit per second. So it's 86,400 seconds in a day, and it is extremely rare for a human to output more than that number of symbols per day. So um, certainly for several days in a row. So you really with a Neuralink interface, you can massively increase your output bandwidth and your input bandwidth.
Oh, I like
Um,
this type of stuff.
Input being
You always watch
writes to
stuff like
you have
this.
to do write operations
Yeah,
to the brain.
I love Elon.
Um, we we have now five humans who have received uh, the kind of the read input,
Incredible.
where it's reading signals, and you've got people with ALS who really have
Yeah, I'm into
they're
politics as well.
quadriplegics, but they can now communicate at similar bandwidth to a human with a fully functioning body, and control their computer and phone, which is pretty cool. And then um, I think in the next 6 to 12 months, we'll be doing our first implants for vision, where even if somebody's completely
Are you
blind,
more
um,
conservative or more liberal
we can write
or
directly
more of a
to
moderate?
the uh, the visual cortex, and we've had that working in monkeys. Actually, I think one of our monkeys now has had a visual implant for 3 years, and at first it'll be relatively fairly low resolution, but long term you would have very high resolution and be able to see in multispectral wavelengths. So
Yeah,
you could see an infrared, ultraviolet, radar, like a superpower situation. But like at
I'm
some
more
point, the
conservative.
cybernetic implants would not simply be correcting things that went wrong, but augmenting human capabilities dramatically, augmenting intelligence and senses and bandwidth dramatically, and that's going to happen at some point. Um, but digital superintelligence will happen well before that.
Do you think?
At least if we have a neural link, we'll be able to appreciate the the AI better.
I guess one of the limiting reagents to all of your efforts across all of these different domains is access to the smartest possible people. Um,
Yes.
but sort of simultaneous to that, we have the rocks can talk and reason, and they're maybe 130 IQ now, and they're probably going to be super intelligent soon.
Yeah.
uh, how do you reconcile those two things? Like, what's going to happen in 5-10 years, and what should the people in this room do to make sure that they're the ones who are creating instead of maybe below the
No,
API line?
Well, they call it the singularity for a reason,
you're
because we
not
don't know what's going to happen
distracting me.
in a not that far future. The
I'm a
percentage
little
of
tired.
intelligence that is human will be quite small. At some point, the collective sum of human intelligence will be less than 1% of all intelligence. Um, and
You
if
don't
things
have
get
to.
to
I love your
Partnership
energy so
level
far.
two, um,
I may
we're
go to
talking
sleep.
about
I might sleep on
human
stream.
intelligence, even assuming a significant increase in human population and intelligence augmentation, like massive intelligence augmentation, where like everyone has an IQ of 1,000 type of thing. Um, Even in that circumstance, collective human
That
intelligence
smile
will
is
be
cute.
probably one
Thank you.
billionth that of